Hello everyone, I'm Tyler Edlin and welcome to Brush Sauce Theater episode 13. Thanks for watching. Before we begin today, I'd like to make a few announcements. They'll be brief. The first is I finally set up a Brush Sauce community page over on Google+. Now, I've never been a real big fan of the Google Plus thing, and it seems to get more complicated with every update, but this seemed like a perfect way, and just easy to set up for everyone to, post your work. It can be anything, you've worked on. This guy, we're already posting videos, works in progress, finished pieces, but the idea is, help each other as a community to improve. So, yeah, I'll put a link to this in the description, and you can just sign up and hopefully, we'll just learn together. The second is I'm also just started where I'm having my friend build me a new main webpage. So, of course, I'll have a more formal announcement when that is all set, but it'll be basically a central hub to everything that I have and can offer. Alright everybody, so for the first part of this video I'll be doing something a bit different. I'm going to be doing a paint over. I'm going to show you a video I recorded of one of my students that his project that he's working on, and I kind of show him my approach to it. He was going to be painting this market scene. His original is in the upper left. And yeah, when you think about it, painting a market scene like this can be a really complicated task at first. There's a lot going on. And so I'm going to be trying to break this down as simply as I can. And I won't be using any complex brushes or shapes. Like 90% I believe I use this square chalky type brush. Just to show you, you can paint, a complex scene without, photo textures or, fancy brushes. I'm just, again, breaking it down to the basics and simplifying things. And so, I tone the background, and I'm going to be using a rather desaturated, warm gray. It's about 50% gray. You can watch it in the color slider, kind of gauge where I'm going with them, but I'm keeping the values really mid-tone to start out with, and then I can increase or decrease them as I start blocking out the major shapes and silhouettes of this. I'll be trying to follow most of the form of his original vision. So in approaching something like this, his scene or my own, when I'm trying to paint, what I always try to do is assess what is not working and then try to fix it in kind of like a systematic way. And when I see his piece and I squint at it or put up in the viewfinder, which I'm sorry I don't do here, but it's just not reading well at all. The values are not there yet, and the colors are not harmonizing. So I hope to solve both those issues with this quick city sketch. And a lot of that is I just kind of find my way through it as I go. We had a thumbnail that was working, and it was working, it was working well enough, so that's what this is based off of. But what, in retrospect, there wasn't enough time spent on was the value composition, kind of plan out how the values will look. We kind of figured out what was in shadow and what was going to be in light, but for everyone, that doesn't necessarily mean instantly, like, click in your head, all right, so what are these values are going to be? I mean, even though they're essentially the same thing, it just takes a little bit of experience to figure out how to work those. And so what I added in there was a layer, I think on lighten mode, and it was kind of like a lighter blue, and that just added a layer of haze and atmosphere to the city. And what I can do now, I can go back and delete some of that to kind of push the buildings forward. And yeah, I made a new layer above it already, and I'm starting to paint in some of the shadows. And I'm keeping shadows pretty warm right here to start for the most part. I know generally people think, shadows are pretty much instantly always going to be the cooler color or whatever, but when I got basically a cooler type of atmosphere right now, I'm having up close some of these shadows be warmer. Normally the blue skylight will fill in the blue skylight of the atmosphere will fill in. You'll have kind of like deep blue shadows, especially on a cool day, and I'll work back towards that. But for now, the first fundamentals I always try to tackle is the composition and the values. So the color can be, adjusted from there. And when it comes to color, I just basically make my decisions based on, is it, first of all, is it the right value, and then saturation, and then temperature. So I'll mess with the temperature of the color last. And so I'm adding in just, scribbles, suggestions that there's a bazaar or marketplace further in the background. Because generally when I'm planning the scene, I do work background to foreground, and that's just an old habit I added. It's just my personal preference. You could approach that any way you'd like. But see, I'm starting to have already, for my colors, I have a lot of subtle variety in here compared to the original, where it was mostly just a blue tone and like an ochre tone. I'm mixing in the blues, oranges, ochres, and I think there might be a low saturated green coming in here as well. Just all colors kind of within the same family, and when you just, instead of taking a solid chunk of one color and you kind of like dab in, kind of like the old pointillism masters, when you make one color with a few colors, things always look more rich and filled with life rather than stiff and flat. That's just my take on how to approach coloring a scene. And so yeah, this is basically just a color composition sketch we're doing. It would be kind of like a comprehensive sketch where it's just taken just slightly a bit further, but then it would need to be kind of tweaked, pushed, and sent all the way to a final. Still a lot of work off from it, but it will get the job done. It's like a quick concept. So I'm just, playing with the shapes that, he originally thought up, of a couple stacks of buildings would be over here on the right, and I'm just playing with that right now. And right now, I'm painting, these colors are mostly dull. I said again, they'd be as if there wasn't kind of like a direct beam of sunlight hitting it. I mean, you could paint all these buildings with like an ambient light, and that'd be perfectly fine, but just again, out of a habit, I like to paint something with maybe like some direct sun on it that's maybe like peeking through a cloud in the sky or something like that, even though I don't really have a sky full of clouds here, but those can be added back in like retroactively. And so yeah, I'm just using the lasso tool to pick out some quick shapes, dab in some tints, and change the color up on them a bit. Just added some variety there, so I got some blue, yellow, and tan ones. Yeah, I'm thinking about it too. This is kind of like a Mos Eisley scene from like Star Wars, kind of like that desert port. And so this is what I was talking about by adding in some more direct sunlight into the scene. And the major thing I did change in this that you probably noticed, or maybe you haven't, is that I raised the horizon line in the scene a bit. Right now it's at the dead bottom on his, and that's perfectly fine. But I kind of didn't even realize this when I was painting it. But yeah, it's raised up, and that will just kind of make it easier for me to show depth going down into the scene, since most of the ground here is flat, but I do end up adding some stairs. And you can push and pull the environment by just making selections and making things recede into shadow or light, basically washing them out a bit. Because you don't want to, if something gets too detailed, then that's just the technique of, toning down the level of detail to direct the viewer's eye into more important areas. Like, that market in the back there on the arch, should be important, but it's not that important, and I don't want it to make it feel like it's taking any more attention to the piece than something I might be putting up in the foreground. And yeah, I'll have the PSD for this up in my Dropbox. I'll make a link for that. You guys can download it and totally feel free to dissect this if you want a more thorough analysis of how I constructed this. But I'm basically just making a new layer once in a while to kind of try out a new thing. Like if I wanted to see if these stairs would work or not that I'm adding here, I just make a new layer for that. That's just my general approach to it. And so yeah, I'm trying to add other elements that I can repeat throughout the scene, kind of build some kind of context of continuity within it to make it feel cohesive as a whole design. So that's why I kind of add like these cylinder-like hydraulic machines or something, maybe like some kind of pumps, or maybe distribute the water or something throughout the city. And it's just thinking of little things like that can make your scene more believable by a lot, than like not having consistent details. You could have like lampposts, look out on the city street, they have there's vending machines, there's trash receptacles, drains, lights, pipes, anything add a layer of more layers of believability if it fits within the context of your scene. So it's coming there, but the composition right now isn't as balanced as I want it. Right now it's kind of like 50-50 left and right. Nothing, if I broke this into the, using the rule of thirds, broke this into the third, in the thirds right now, nothing would be reading excessively well on one side or the other on one of those areas. So eventually that's what I aim to try to solve with this. So yeah, that now I'm going back and adding some of the pipes and then some of the more direct light that I talked about. And so far this is probably the most saturated I have gotten with any of the colors yet. So it's in this bright light. And sometimes those are really easy to push to if you just make an overlay layer above what you're working on. Grab an airbrush and, brush right in some like really harsh light, and then you can either lower the opacity or I lower the opacity of the layer, or I just delete out some of the light where I don't need it. And again, I can go back in and richen up these colors in the foreground by adding some of that blue. It kind of looks blue, right? As you see I'm painting, but if you look on the color picker, it's actually just a low saturated orange that makes it look blue because of the relationship of the colors that it's next to. And so yeah, this was looking still just a tad too monochromatic, for my taste. So I was like, let's add another element of green in here, like maybe to some people who grow plants and stuff, and that'll help them out. But yeah, this is about wrapping up to a finish. I just thought, this scene does need some people. So here's like the group of hunters coming back from their trip, and maybe they use like a mule or some type of beast to carry their gear, and then I try to reflect that, and I'll paint just another hint of some more of those caravans or escorts or whatever throughout the city in the background, and that'll kind of just complete the scene. This just needs, this original fountain just needs a little bit of light cast on it, but essentially that will just wrap up the idea. And this main kind of like little walking escort guy is also adds a layer, like a focal point, and it's really dark and it's silhouetted by the light background, and that's how I make it read and pop. So on to the next one. Alright everyone, hey, I'm back, and what we have here for the second one is quite a bit different. This is from, a colleague of mine, a good friend. He's a lot further in his career than, the last one that I showed, so this will be a bit different. This seems, I'd say, and him and I agree, this was about 95% there. It's something he had worked on, and, he was just like, this is what we do a lot, like freelancers. We just pass it to the next guy, like, hey, do you see anything at all I can tweak on this to just make it a little bit better? Because, if you're isolated working on something by yourself the entire time, it always never hurts to have a fresh pair of eyes on something, which is also, part of the reason I created the Brush Sauce community page, so we can all post work there and get feedback from each other. And so, yeah, this scene, I loved it. I wish I had more scenes like this in my portfolio personally. And so the first thing I wanted to do when I saw it is just make it read just a little bit better value-wise, and I try to approach that by adding some cooler colors in the background here, even where it's well lit. Like I'm adding some slight blues and greens right here with like a texture brush, nothing too fancy, and that'll make it recede in the background just a bit more. And I'm having a stronger light, a brighter blue, kind of pick up some of the moonlight, I believe it is, on the edges of this. And that's what I just did. And of course, to make it kind of like a dark fantasy, moody type of scene, it never hurts to have something underlit with a warm color. And that's what was my second idea, to kind of space out this shape and platform, this walkway that he's on. I started building up some warm colors right below that. And you can see I turn it on and off. It's already starting to read just a bit better. And I would just make, one pass with a rock brush and then skew it into place, and I can go back and delete some areas I don't want. And it looks like, there's something crazy warm down there, and it's coming up to the side of this rock and lighting all those. And so, of course, every plane that is on the bottom, instead of being a really harsh stark dark, I just add a little bit of that same orange underneath it to catch that light. And you can start, as I'm doing here with these little lips and edges on the underside, you can start designing bits of the architecture too by how you decide to light things, and you can basically designing it with light. And so I'm just adding a little bit color variety in here. His values, generally as a whole work great, and I love them. And his color scheme is fine too. I'm working within his color scheme to kind of push it a little bit further, just to get rid of a little bit of the monochromaticness of it being kind of like a bluish gray to slightly bit on the warm side up close. So I'm adding some greens, some like greens, oranges underneath the lights and the signs over on this structure that he has on the left side now. And just showing some of that light catch some of those edges underneath there really helps define the form as well. At least I thought so. I mean, I did. When taking a piece like this, though, the first thing that's always in my head is like I wanna help him, and I also don't want to ruin what he the good everything great that he already has going here. And so I'm just playing with the lighting a bit. And that is some mega shrine dark complex up there. I mean, I love the scale of that, and so that's what I try to help push, is how I'll go back and make it a bit cooler and play with the light. I'm adding a little bit of this atmosphere, like again playing more with the ambient light in this, having some of that sky soften up that slightly, and then I delete most of that just to help again push those forms. And then I add a slight bit of noise to it, and I go back and I can smudge it, and that adds all kinds of little greens and purples and just very subtle. Again with the color variety and going back to the pointillism masters, that's what I was trying to go for. But it's how you got to make it look kind of subtle and effortlessly, which is the real hard part. And so I'm just making a couple selections on the character, make some more of these. I believe he's like a hulking ogre type character, going to pay his duties up there at the temple. I'm not quite sure the story behind it, but yeah, I'm just going to try to make some of the ambient light catch the rim of his skin and armor. So right now they're all warm colors. I got to kind of convert those to cooler ones to make things more cohesive. You'd think from the lit shrine up ahead that you could make it as it was, catch the sides of his armor and be warm, and that could work. It's even believable, but I just thought having the blue on him contrast with the warm of the doorway would be a good way of making both stand out more. And since he's way further back and out in this blue sunlight anyways, that it's just a direction that I thought would help it. And yeah, again, I'm gonna try to liven it. Not liven, but help the form a bit of these stairs pop a little bit. So I'll have them catch just a little bit of this cool. I'm toning the tops of the stairs a lighter color, and it's kind of like the blues, oranges, and purples I'm sticking with. It really helps the plane read a bit. I'll go back and soften that up in a bit, I believe. He had a really good limited palette and it was working well, so I'm not trying to take that from him. I'm just trying to add a little bit of variety. So I think it's right after I do this, I realize, alright, I might be getting just a bit too colorful for what he was aiming for, so I scale it back and start softening up some of it and erasing it. Oh man, this guy looks like he's traveled far to get up in this tomb. I don't know what he's going to do there, but hopefully it works out for him. Yeah, I thought I could make the character pop even more by adding the slight warm glow on his edges behind him, and I actually should have pushed that further. I don't show it in the video, but since there's really some nice hard edges with his armor, his shoulder pads and stuff, but I really wanted to show that on the skin here anyway. And then, if he goes back and pushes it further, he can always kind of finish what I started here with this idea. Yeah, but Drawing the back sides of the elbows might be the things I'm terrible at. I have no idea how to do that without several reference photos. And again, I'm just trying to reflect the what I started with, the underglow on the other side of the stairs, and kind of making it over on the left too now. And I'll delete that one texture mark I made, and to make it more a more solid, more opaque. So, and then I'll just kind of smudge it as I need it, and then delete it. And that's kind of, it's a bit of an advanced technique. That's just knowing how to use a texture brush. It could be done perfect, just as well, completely by hand. It basically just saved me a little bit of time. So now, I thought, just kind of finish it up, I'll just add a little bit of atmosphere and haze to it. And when you kind of make some smoke marks, or when you warp everything and distort it kind of far, the pixels kind of get stretched, and it actually has a nice effect that it looks. I mean, it's not for everything, but it definitely helps with the atmosphere. And so yeah, to wrap it up, I just kind of do a color adjustment, make everything cool and blue, and then I'll darken it and just help the last bit of the values up top, and that'll be it. So hopefully it was as successful as it went in my mind. I don't want to make super high contrast everywhere I go, but see, I tone the whole thing down, and then I think I hide it and then make a mask of what I selectively want to be more darker, and then it kind of pushes this whole structure out from even what's going on in the background. Love this piece though. Can't wait to see how it really turns out. So thank you for watching and subscribing, and take care. Hope you stop by the community and leave some posts. Bye everyone. Alright everyone, for this week's question, Sarah asks from the community, I am starting new work, any advice before I start? And I kind of get this a lot, actually. It's kind of like an open-ended question almost, in a sense, but basically what I said was to paint with a plan. Everything is done better, and I've said this in a lot of videos, with a plan. Do value comps, at like a thumbnail level, and do even more comprehensive ones at a color sketch of the value comp once you get the values right. And I'll illustrate 2 examples of what I mean that with Nathan Folksart. He's a professional and he works for DreamWorks, and a lot of professionals do this for one reason, because it works and it gets good results. Besides when you're just sitting around sketching or experimenting, if you're looking to make a new piece and have it really worth your time, plan it out, thoroughly. It's just too much to kind of get the value, the color, all of it all, and have it all come together in like perfect harmony. And especially if you're adding design on top of that. So with those 3 elements all at once, just kind of going into it blindly, you're gonna put a lot of stress on your mind, and you'll probably not get as satisfied, and and you'll burn yourself out quickly. I know, because I've spent years doing that exact same thing, and from my experience, I can just say to plan things out, and it will just be easier and you'll get better results. So yeah, here's just some examples of the values and how he translated that in several different color varieties with the same values. I mean, how would he have known exactly what direction to take on this scene? I believe it's from the Prince of Egypt here, this one in particular, if he didn't plan out, how he was gonna approach the color. It would have been a lot to kind of do it all from scratch in one pass. So yeah, just keep that in mind, and don't rely on photo manipulation or custom brushes. Just get down to do some raw painting if you're starting out. Keep it simple brushes, and make sure every kind of brush stroke and mark you put on the canvas is intentional and done with a purpose. Alright, thank you.